For years, every workout decision was up for debate. Should I try the new yoga class everyone's in? Should I go back to jogging? With limited time, do I prioritize strength training or HIIT? I was running my own health like a meeting at work that I never adjourned. Every choice was up for discussion. I was taking a vote on my own health, and the version of me that wanted an easy answer always won. That was a fast path to overthinking, decision fatigue, and subpar results, despite significant effort. And it wasn't a discipline problem. It was a governance problem. So I borrowed a framework from a book called Crucial Conversations, 4 Ways to Make a Decision. And I'll share how naming which one I was using changed my experience at work, at home, and eventually with my own health, including a significant data point I did not expect. Welcome to the company of one. How I run myself with the same standards we use to lead teams. Season 3 is the personal operating system. Last time, we talked goal setting, aka the quarterly rock, how 90 days can be transformative. Today, we get into the nuance of decision making, how the call actually gets made, and who gets a say. Here's the top line. 4 decision types, 3 places I use them, at work, at home, and in my own biology, and the one I've been using all wrong for 2 decades. Last episode, I shared how I successfully leveraged 90-day goals, or ROCs, incremental, meaningful, sustainable steps to improve my health, picking one priority and giving it a quarter, over and over again. But having the plan didn't stop my brain from constant chatter. I found myself experiencing massive decision fatigue because I kept treating my own health like an open debate. I had chosen my 90-day goal and then spent weeks quietly renegotiating it in my head. Look for just one more article, seek one more opinion, consider one more version that asked less of me. Why does this matter? Here's what I notice about us. Executives who lead at work, lead at home, and are finally ready to bring that same intensity to ourselves. We'd never make decisions that way at work. We assign decision rights for $1 million line item. Then we leave that meeting and let a show of hands decide our own health. And if we're just meeting, I'm Alicia Bell. Hold an executive seat where my job is deciding how decisions get made. I'm a 44-year-old mom who spent 20 years running that playbook at work and never once ran it on my own health. I'm not a physician and I'm not a guru. I'm in this with you, running the experiment on myself first and then sharing the receipts. So 3 things today. 1, the 4 decision types and how to tell them apart. 2, how I use them at work and at home. And 3, the one command decision I made about my own health after 2 decades of putting it to a vote. And at the end, I'll share the outcome that surprised me the most. I always assumed committing fully would eat up more of my schedule. It turns out it bought my time back. Quick definition, because this undergirds the whole episode. In the best-selling book, Crucial Conversations, there's a section called Move to Action. Authors argue that most decisions don't fall apart because people disagree. They fall apart because nobody ever said how the decision was going to get made. They lay out 4 options for decision making. Command, one person decides, no input required. Consult, we gather input widely and then one person decides. Vote, majority wins and we move on. Consensus, we keep working until everyone genuinely agrees. None of them are the universal right choice. They're context-dependent tools, and each one costs us either speed or buy-in. And here's the framing that reorganized how I think. The cost of a decision isn't just what you decide. It's how long the decision stays open. First, at work. This one's a consult decision. Consult decisions are the type many leaders get wrong. We either skip the input entirely and call it decisive, or we gather input and let everyone believe they're voting, and then decide something else, which reads as disingenuous at best and a betrayal at worst, even when the call was the right one. The fix is rather simple. We say out loud, before we ask anyone for their opinion, I am going to make the final call, and I want your input first. Here's where it got real for us at work. We were locked in an office lease throughout the pandemic, no leverage to renegotiate. So we paid full rent on a space we barely used while we pivoted to a hybrid and, honestly, mostly virtual team. And as the lease came up, everybody had a different answer. Renew short term and stay flexible. Move somewhere smaller. Go virtual and drop the real estate entirely. Buy co-working passes so people could work near home. Every one of those had a real case behind it. The budget call was mine. It had to be. It was a P&L decision. But if I had just announced it, I would have missed something important. So we named it. This is a consult. I'm deciding, and I need to hear your thoughts first. And what came out of it was the part I didn't expect. People told us things about how they were actually working that had never surfaced during the pandemic years. Needs nobody had said out loud because they didn't know if their input would be valued. We landed in a smaller space with a great common area. Every square foot working for us. A meaningfully smaller expense line. But the reason it worked wasn't the square footage. It was that the team's actual needs were in the room before the decision got made. Consulting isn't weakness. It's clarifying who decides before you ask what everyone thinks. The mechanism isn't about making the decision easier. It's about setting expectations. When we name how a choice will be made, input feels like input, rather than everyone silently tallying votes in an election that was never happening, which is exactly why this can also work at home with a different approach. Second, at home. This one is consensus, and I spend it deliberately. I've learned that consensus is often the most expensive way we can make a decision. It takes the longest, demands the most conversation, and is rarely the right tool for the moment, which explains why so many meetings feel like they're dying slowly. But expensive isn't the same as wasteful. Expensive means we spend it on the things where buy-in is the whole point. For us, that's family vacations. My husband, my son, and I decide where we're going together, and we keep talking until all three of us are genuinely in. Not 2 out of 3, not one parent making a decision alone. With the pace our family runs the rest of the year, that week is a treasure. And a trip where one of us is quietly along for the ride is not the same trip. So we utilize the expensive decision-making option on purpose. Because the thing I'm actually buying isn't the destination. It's 3 people who all want to be there. Consensus is expensive. That's why I save it for the week we'll be talking about 10 years from now. So that's 2 of the 4 decision styles. At work, I consult. Wide input, one decider. At home, on the things that matter most, we go for real consensus. Which brings me to an uncomfortable question. If I'm this deliberate about decision rights in a conference room and at my own kitchen table, what was I doing with my own health? And the answer is, I was holding an election every single week, and it wasn't working. If you're trying to figure out what part of your own health has been stuck in committee, that's exactly what the assets audit is for. It's a free one-pager I built to help identify which of the 6 executive health pillars is running in the red. Links in the description, grab it whenever. Third, my health. And this is the one that took me 20 years to get right. Here's the pattern I couldn't see while I was inside of it. Fitness is an industry that runs on new, shiny things to sell us. There is always a next modality, a next-gen studio, an innovative protocol with a compelling founder story and a testimonial that reflects our own journey. And if we treat every one of those as a fresh vote on how we exercise, a genuine open question, relitigated whenever something new shows up, then we never actually accumulate anything meaningful. We just keep starting. So let me tell you what my ballot looked like. CrossFit, Orange Theory, Pilates, yoga, spin, and a very unlike me phase of daily jogs during the pandemic. And going back further, about half a lifetime ago, I was actually in a Tae Bo video. Yes, that Tae Bo. Billy Blanks, the at-home boxing workout. I was in the background, kicking and punching, and sweating more than I was proud of. I want to be clear that I don't regret any of it, and none of those things are bad. I have friends who are thriving in every single one of those rooms, and I applaud them. The problem was never the modality. The problem was that I never closed the question. Every marketing claim, every influencer, every friend's transformation was another voice in a poll I kept rerunning. I was extremely consistent at reconsidering. That's not discipline. That's analysis paralysis dressed up as research. What ended it was making a command decision, not a better program, a closed question. For years now, I've been committed to strength training, lifting heavy at the gym with my husband 3 days a week, roughly an hour if I'm moving at a good clip. That's 180 minutes. That's the whole workout budget. I still try to get my 10,000 steps most days, but I file that under movement, not training. That's not actually the workout. That's just part of daily life. Now, when a new trend comes along, it isn't a referendum. It might be a fun recreational activity, but it's not my workout. That debate is over. I spent 20 years holding an election for my workout. One decision closed the polls. Now, here's what I promised at the top, the part that genuinely surprised me. I assumed that going all in would cost me more time, more effort, and more commitment than I had space for. But 180 minutes a week is actually less than I used to spend chasing the next thing. The class schedules, the studio commutes, the research, the constant starting over. And the physical result? My last DEXA scan showed that I had added 12.1 pounds of lean mass over the past year, which honestly is on the higher end, but I'd had room to build. I want to be clear. I'm not a physician and this isn't a prescription. That is just one data point from my own experiment, reflecting my training, my nutrition, and my sleep. But here's the part I can say plainly. The years I spent keeping my options open were the years that nothing accumulated. It was closing the question, not trying harder, that finally let the effort compound. And the 4 types of decision-making gave me language for what I was actually doing. At work, I consult. At home, on what matters, we build consensus. But for my own health, I kept waiting for a majority that didn't exist. And here's the bottom line. I'm the only stakeholder in my own biology. Self-trust meant it was always a command decision. Let's address 2 things you might be wondering about. Question 1, isn't a command decision just being stubborn? It would be if it was permanent, but a command decision isn't a vow. It's a closed question with a review date. I revisit mine when my labs or my DEXA scan tell me my baseline changed. What I don't do is reopen it just because a targeted ad found me on a Tuesday night. Question 2, what if I actually don't know which thing to commit to? Then you're in a consult, and that's perfectly valid. Gather input, talk to your doctor, track your data. The trap isn't consulting. The trap is consulting forever. It feels like progress and never requires you to be wrong. But eventually, someone has to make the call. For your body, that's you. I stopped putting my body to a vote and started giving it a command. And if this reframed how you think about decision fatigue, I hope you'll subscribe. New videos every Thursday for the executive who's finally ready to bring that same intensity to herself. Closing that big question was a heavy lift, but it turns out my daily bandwidth was actually being drained by the small stuff. So in the next video, we're moving from high-level frameworks to daily execution. I'll share how I use 2 specific principles from The Power of Less: only handle it once and batch processing. I'll show you how I've used them for years to handle everything from my inbox to my meal prep, so you can stop redeciding your life every morning. Because when you're optimized, everyone wins. See you over there.